Hey guys, welcome back. Formula One 2019, and we are about to head to round 15 in Singapore. We are fresh off of our nearly getting our first podium at Monza at the Power Circuit. We are heading to a very different track in Singapore, a very technical circuit, lots of corners, a city circuit, so tight walls, not a lot of room for error, no real runoffs in a lot of the areas. So we're going to see what we can do with a very different feeling track in the same car. We are going to be taking a bit of a grid penalty. We do need a new gearbox for this event, so we'll see how we can qualify and see how much that hurts us. But let's take a look at our messages real quick. You see a quick peek at just the twistiness of the track, and it's one of the longest races of the season. Rear downforce is good on the upgrade, and again, we just can't get away from it. There's going to be rain at the very tail end of the race. Again, just like in Monza, that last little block is going to have some rain, so we should probably see that in the last probably 3 to 7 laps is kind of the window. Well, we might see that in, but you see that major rear downforce upgrade comes in. It's a good time to have that for a much more technical, twisty circuit. Only got 6 more items left to adapt in our chassis department before we can move back on for that. You can see we are really closing down with that tight midfield battle. You've got Haas, you've got McLaren, you've got Alfa Romeo there, and then it's a little bit of a jump to Racing Point and Renault. But we are going to go ahead and switch off of our sweet, fresh Stack 3 power unit setup. We're going to put on stuff that's a little bit more worn. We don't necessarily need the raw power on this circuit here. So before we start to get into trouble with some of our other units, we're going to go ahead and run them from mid-level percentages on wear to higher, so we can basically write them out for the rest of the season and only worry about more well-performing units that we'll use for the tail end. I mean, we are at round 15 of 21, so we've only got about 6 races left to go after this, and we will be able to have 2 to 3 power unit pieces components available for to spread across those final races. So we shouldn't have to take any more penalties. Maybe a gearbox penalty in the last race or two, just the way it's kind of shaking out, unless we can magically make one of our gearboxes last a little bit longer. But as you see, we've already got pending the new gearbox about to go on, and let's get ready to head out to qualifying, I suppose.
Welcome along again to the Marina Bay Circuit. The atmosphere is thick, not just with humidity, but with tension as well, as we get ready for qualifying here at the Singapore Grand Prix. It always looked like the kind of track that asks an awful lot of the rear tyres, such as the frequency of low-speed exits.
No matter how good a driver is at managing their throttle application to limit rear slip, they can't always overcome a car that's inherently bad at looking after its rear tyres. Here we have a lot of low-speed corner exits, which means a whole load of energy, heat and tyre wear.
All right, and it's a night qualifying night race here in Singapore, but let's go ahead and take a little tour of this circuit. Down the short chute of the front straight into this technical left-right, and then a much tighter left-hander before you get on the power down this next little slippery bit and through the DRS detection zone. We've got a pretty quick right-hander there that leads into the first big long straight, one of the better DRS opportunities on the course, but you are going to hit a pretty hard braking zone into a mid-speed left-hander, followed immediately by a short run into a very tight right-hander. And combinations of corners is the name of the game here at Singapore, but we are through that opening up corner there and into this very twisty section of track that leads to the bridge and the hairpin that will lead us into the next long straightaway. So here we are across the bridge, hard braking right as you hit that curve, and you're all the way down to first gear and have to be very careful to manage your throttle application coming out of that hairpin. Otherwise, you'll spin up the tires. But there we are, down into another slow right-hander. Little bit of oversteer on the exit of that one there. A little bit of a gentle left into a right. Now we are headed under a little overpass area here. This is very boxy, a lot of 90-degree corners. You head underneath the structure there. Another tight 90 right, 90 left, and we are getting ready to set ourselves up for the final 2 corners here and get back on the main straight. A little downshift and then power out to cross the line down the start finish for the next DRS zone. We went ahead and went back to back with our laps. We're sitting P16 at the moment. We have a little bit of an improvement, and we'll see what happens when other guys put in their times. We are dead last. Was not expecting that. Thought we actually had a pretty good time in, but apparently we were just not fast enough. So we are knocked out in Q1. We're already taking the grid penalty. So we are starting dead last, back of the grid. And, you know, after coming off of such a good performance at Monza, we really hoping for a good result here. But let's see what we can do.
Hello and welcome one and all to the shining streets of Singapore. Can you believe we've been coming here for nearly a decade now? It feels like only yesterday that Felipe Massa was dragging his fuel hose down the pit lane in that eventful opening race, and in a Grand Prix won from pole position more often than not, will we see a new victor crowned today? It's a 3.1 mile lap here at the Marina Bay Street Circuit with 47% taken at full throttle. It's hot, humid and bumpy around the 13 lefts and the 10 rights of mostly slow corners. But we should see speeds of up to 200 miles per hour along the Raffles Boulevard. Anthony Davidson is alongside me in the commentary box this evening, and big race this one, a real test of endurance. Sounds right up your alley. Wouldn't you just love to be down there on the grid right now?
You know what, Crofty? I'm pretty happy to be up here in my air conditioning, thank you, right now. I can't stress just how difficult these conditions can be, especially when you consider it's the longest race on the calendar in terms of time. It's also one of those races where you have to remember to keep drinking, or there's a real risk of dehydration, just like we saw with young Kevin Magnussen a couple of years ago, don't forget. We mentioned the bumps as well. Take a look at the onboards if you get a chance during this race. The movement in the suspension and the chassis is just incredible, and it's lots of hard work to wrestle the car around the lap here.
Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. Daniel Ricciardo starts from pole position today, with Charles Leclerc alongside. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Hamilton, Gasly, Sebastian Vettel, and Raikkonen, Perez, Hülkenberg, Russell, and Kevin Magnussen, Stroll, Norris, Carlos Sainz, and Albon, Bottas, Grosjean, Devon Butler, and Max Verstappen. They've taken a grid penalty, Weber and Oldtimer, and now it's time to head down to the track.
Okay, top 15 is what we expect from you today. See if you can bring home the result we want.
So unlike some of the earlier races when we took starting from the back of the grid, I decided not to take 30 positions worth of engine component penalties. I decided to keep what we're running with. It's a little more realistic to not take a full set. I mostly did that early on just to kind of bank for later in the season, which seems to have worked out. Strategy-wise, though, being bumped out in the first means we have free choice of tire for our strategy. And so starting at the back of the grid, we're going to try and make something happen here. A lot of people are going to be starting on softs and mediums and going to have to make a pit stop. We're going to see just how far we can push the hards. If we can put it all the way to when the rain starts, we can turn this into a one-stop race when other cars are going to have to make a two-stop if the rain comes. If the rain doesn't come, then I'm kind of stuck out to dry. But there's the 5 red lights up and the lights out, and away we go. And we're going to get a little bit of a tentative start. Obviously, the harder compounded tire doesn't grip up quite as quick on the start. We're going to be a little slower off the line and off the launch there, but we're a little too far back to make any sort of daring lunges into the first corner. But we're going to go ahead and settle down and just kind of try and keep our nose clean. It is one of the longest races on this calendar. 31 laps around this circuit for our 50% race. It is a very, very long race. and we have plenty of opportunity to make mistakes or stay clean, but we're a little slow off the launch in some of these tighter corners right now, but we're going to go ahead and dive to the inside of Butler as he's caught up in the train there, and we have enough room. Now, early season me probably would have gone for the double dive to get Verstappen as well, but we're going to, again, I'm playing it a little more safe to try and just keep the car alive throughout this race. And we're going to go ahead and settle in a little bit and kind of follow the train, get a feel for how other cars are moving around the track, get some heat into these hard compounded tires, which it does take a little while to get them to their optimal operating temperatures. But this is another good overtaking area, a bit of a long straight. You can get a decent tow, no DRS, but into a braking zone if you're daring enough. But as you can see on the mini-map, it's basically sorted out into a long snake of cars coming through these final sets of corners, getting ready to head down the main straight. A couple of the leaders have jumped off ahead. Obviously, Verstappen is a little bit out of position being in that Red Bull. He had to take some penalties. Same with the Mercedes, about 4 slots ahead of us. Valtteri up there, also kind of out of position. Should be running with the leaders, but he is kind of back in the group here as we, once again, for lap 2, make our run down into turn 1. And Verstappen is really starting to get all over the gearbox of Romain Grosjean right in front of him. No DRS yet, but he may have a good run through this next long straight to get a good tow and have a chance of challenging, because he's definitely a quicker car at this point. You can see he is all over him, and there he goes, pulling side by side. He's going to look to the inside of the braking zone. They are very slow as Grosjean really squeezed down it, but they're still wheel to wheel through the next corner. A little bit of contact between the two. I really can't go anywhere quite yet. Had a thought of trying to follow Verstappen through that corner, but Grosjean was able to shut the door on us just enough. So Verstappen manages to get through, and we are just behind Grosjean now. Now hopefully that'll allow us a little bit of room to try and make a maneuver. We are on a harder tire, so we're not as fast as those guys on the mediums. But if we can be making up positions on this early stint, by the time everybody else starts dropping into the pits, we'll be able to jump even more cars by staying out on these hard tires. And as long as our pace stays good, we can really push these hard tires basically as long as we'd like. And so we are closing up on Grosjean here. Next time past the line is going to be the DRS enabled. And hopefully that'll allow us a chance to attack Grosjean down the DRS straights. We won't get it down the front straight because the detection zone is not after DRS is enabled.
DRS is now
So we are going to hang station, just kind of stay in his tow down this next area. But the next sector, the next DRS straight, we are going to have DRS on him. So if we can get a good enough run out of this next corner, we will have a very good opportunity to make up another position. And we are pretty tight on his tail here. You can see it, wing flipped open. We are closing up on the back end, and we are right behind him. And we're going to go ahead and look to the inside and get a little later on the brakes, and it's a clean pass. We don't have to go wheel to wheel through the corner with him. We're able to fully complete the pass on the exit, and it's easy peasy, lemon squeezy for that first on track or second on track pass, I suppose. Up to P18 now. So we're going to hop ahead just a little bit to P8. We've kind of reeled in Verstappen and Webber. They are being held up by this long train. We're going to look down to the inside of Verstappen as he was caught up in the braking of Bottas and Webber, but we are wheel to wheel with them down this next straight. A little later on the brakes, teeny bit of a lockup and go a little bit deep, but we're able to get pretty cleanly by him, and we're going to blink and you miss it, jump another lap ahead to 10 through the DRS zone, late on the brakes past Webber. Easy again. That seems to be a spot that our car is able to make some serious ground up when we crank up the DRS deployment, and now we are going to try and reel in the Mercedes of Valtteri Bottas, who's being held up a little bit by the slower Toro Rosso of Albon. Now with the DRS on these straights, the longer trains we were in really held us up, simply because everybody was getting DRS. You weren't able to really make a run on the car in front of you, so you had to really wait for the slowest car essentially to get shuffled towards the back of the line, and then that car would then be jumped by each person one by one. And that's why it's taking, you know, a lap or two to really set up a pass on anybody, or even within a striking distance on, even if you have a pace advantage on them, like we did on Grosjean, like we did on Weber. But I would bet that Bottas is going to look to make a move probably down this next sector. He's definitely quicker in that Mercedes than Albon is in that Toro Rosso. As we are also getting ourselves involved, as we have a great exit off the final corner. There he goes. Bottas is looking to the inside of Albon. We are looking just around the outside. Bottas actually kind of squeezes us off as he's not able to complete his move there. As we see a camera angle we haven't seen yet this season. The wing cam. But he's not able to make the move. We're going to hold up in the next DRS session. You see the nice activation of the DRS, a good view of how that wing works, and Weber right behind us still. Well, that's flipped open as Bottas is going again at Albon. They're very slow through that corner. I am rolled right up on them. They're a little later on the brakes. I wasn't able to quite make a dive down Albon there, but they are still side by side fighting to see who is going to come out on top in that position. And the more they fight in front of me, the more they slow each other down, and allows me to stay in contact. But finally, Valtteri is able to make that pass stick and get by Albon, and that's now going to be our chance to try and make our way past him and keep working up the grid, as we are sitting P16 currently. 11 laps into this 31 lap race, still running pretty strong on our hard tires, as this very different strategy we're using compared to everybody else. But starting the back of the grid, you got to make something happen. So it's definitely a dice roll. I mean, there are definitely chances where that rain could possibly not even come at the tail end of the race, and we'd essentially hang ourselves out to dry. We'd be finishing on a short stint on the softs if the rain did not come. Really, worst case scenario for us is if the rain comes with like 4 laps to go, because I've essentially projected that pit onto the softs with about 5 or 6 laps to go. So into the braking zone, we go around the outside of Albon. He forces us onto the curbing, so we don't go fully by him through that corner, even though we could have. We don't want to take that position illegally, but he's wheel to wheel with us, so we have to leave a little room on the outside through that corner. But we are able to finish it off and get on the throttle nicely. But since we were just nose ahead through the detection zone, we do not have DRS. He has DRS on us. He's going to look down to the inside of us, but we are going to hang it out around the outside and just manage to hold him off as he re-attacked us through that next DRS zone. So now it is up to us to chase down Valtteri Bottas and that group tailed by the McLaren and headed by the Renault. You can see on the mini-map a little bit ways up the track, but we are up into P15 now, which is what Jeff wanted us to hit, but we were gunning a little higher considering we've had a pretty decent run of good form the last few races.
Okay, gap ahead is 2.2 seconds.
Yeah, so about 2.2 seconds off of the Mercedes. You can see him really reeling in that group. He's almost on the tail of it as we head through this final sector once again. Alright, so a few of the pit stops have shaken out. Some of these soft runners have already dove in. A couple of the early medium pitters. There's a couple, I think Russell might be the only other car out on hards to start the race. But we are sitting P9 after the first group of pit stops have come in, and we have reeled in our teammate who started a fair bit further up the grid than us, and of course we got caught in that back end train, so it opened up a lot of track gap. And so we are chasing him down. Valtteri's already gotten past him, which is not surprising at all, but we are through a little sector that is tough to pass in as we come to the hairpin and see if we can't get a good run down this next straight. And we get a pretty good acceleration. We start to reel him in, so we're going to tuck in, grab some toe, dive to the inside of him, and outbrake him into that tight right-hander and get that position We are headed into the third sector once again, and we're going to go ahead and jump ahead 2 more laps up to lap 19. Still sitting P8, but you can see we're going by a couple of cars through the pit lane. They are P6 now. Kimi Räikkönen is switched onto the hards and has actually been reeling us in pretty significantly. So he may become a challenger to us depending on how this race goes, but he's showing very good pace on those hard compounded tires that he's switched to. Let's take a quick peek. We're sitting about 30-something%.
Use some of this energy.
We're going to go ahead and jump ahead. Lap 22, there's some raindrops starting to fall, and you see the red dot of Räikkönen drop off behind us. He DNF, and we are going to have a virtual safety car come out, so we are going to have to hold time to a delta. Not a full safety car coming out, but it is something that is definitely going to slow us down, but it slows everybody down, but gives us a little bit of time to save the tires, I suppose, but the rain is out, so we're trying to start to get a feel for how this track is going to develop in the wet. Some tracks, obviously, like the way Silverstone was earlier in the year, as soon as that rain hit, it was like next lap was awful. Same with Spa. So we'll see how the rain behaves here. But so far, we have not a great reading because we're already running light on the throttle. So we don't know the wheel spin characteristics quite yet since we're not really pushing, but we're about to have it, and there's the green flags. And so we're going to go ahead and get a feel for how these tires are going to react as this light rain starts to come down. Just looking at the track, though, it doesn't seem to be getting too wet, doesn't seem to be picking up too much standing water. So we'll see how far we can run it. We jump ahead, lap 25. You can see we're still on those hard tires. The rain is coming down, but we are definitely starting to feel the effect. So we've decided 6 laps to go in this race. We're going to go ahead and dive in now and grab those inters.
The turbocharger is on its last legs. Let's try to keep mileage on it to a minimum.
And there you see the turbo starting to feel a little bit of pain. We are using a slightly more worn set of components here, so that's not too surprising. This will probably be the last race we run with that particular turbocharger. But we are one of the first cars into the pits on the inters. As you can see, a lot of other cars are going past us. Actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we were actually the first car onto the green grooved intermediate tires. But let's see where we come out and see what kind of run that we can crawl back up through, since other cars are going to have to pit and are apparently doing another lap on the dry tires. But you can see Albon goes just around the outside of us as we get out of the pit lane, but since we are on the wet surface tire, we're able to get much better traction out of that corner and just basically drag race him down the next straight. We are better through the corner, and they are really feeling the pain of having those hard, slick tires in this wet surface. We may be a little early. We probably could have done another lap on the slicks, but seeing how we're performing relative to these other cars, I feel like we made a good move, and we've turned this race, like we hoped, into a one-stop race. Everybody had already made one pit stop going from slick to slick, but now they're going to have to make another one. There's no way they're going to be able to push like we did in Italy, 2 laps on wet condition on the slick tires. We've got still 5 laps left in this race. They are going to have to come in and get new tires. So if we can keep chewing through these guys that are on the slicks right now, we can make good ground when those pit stops all come in. You can see DRS is disabled. That's usually a good indicator of a decent switchover point between the slicks and inters. At least I've noticed in this game. You can typically run slicks as long as the DRS is still enabled, but as soon as the DRS is disabled, you're going to want to be on those wet surface tires. We managed to reel in Russell and Verstappen here, but there's just no room on this section of the track to make a move on them. So even though we could have had an opportunity just pure pace-wise to get by them, there's just no space through that sector to make any kind of overtake. So luckily, they're all diving in. We only have to really hold ourselves up for a couple of corners, but you can see there's a nice long line of cars that are diving into the pits and making their changes. Couple cars getting ready to come out, but you can see a Toro Rosso, I believe, of Albon behind us, staying out another lap on those dry tires, and you can see the racing point of Sergio Perez is a little behind us. We managed to jump him, so we're P8 after the first series of pit stops. We were P5 before we dove in the first time, so there are a few more cars ahead, but after those cars came into the pits, everybody's on airs now. We're back up to P5. And we're crossing the line for our final lap of this race. It's pretty much a smooth sailing, running in clean air for the majority after the other cars came into the pits. Although, you see that pink dot, Sergio Perez actually has been reeling us in a little bit each lap. And we've been just kind of playing the numbers game and seeing if we can keep enough pace to where he's not going to reel us in before the end of this race.
We're not going to be able to run in this engine mode much longer. We're about a lap over target. Drop down to mix too soon.
But yeah, and as you can hear Jeff complaining about us using the higher engine modes, we've been really dialing that stuff up to just try and keep Perez behind us. It's kind of tough to run the higher engine mode sometimes because, especially in the wet, it gives you the tendency of putting too much throttle down, and you'll spin the tires up and not be able to control the car well. So sometimes running in those lower fuel mixtures, lower ERS deployments will allow you a little more control over the wheel spin of the car. But then you're having to do management on the straights and dial it up once you get your traction down. So I just kind of took it as a personal challenge to learn to control that throttle a lot more finely and manage wheel spin even with a higher ERS and fuel deployment mode on the wet surface. But he's kind of creeping up on us, seems to be about a second or so behind, but I think he's going to just run out of time as we are heading under the bridge there as we come into the last couple of corners. A little bit of snap oversteer, but that's kind of to be expected in the wet there. Daniel Ricciardo breaks his Red Bull blues finally and grabs the race win. And we are going to grab the checkered flag, P5. So we were 4th last week in Monza. And we are 5th here on a much tougher track. A track I wasn't really prepared for, but that was purely strategy that got us there.
It was a magnificent race and a drive right out of the top draw to take the win for Red Bull today. What do you think it was, Ant, that gave them the edge over the competition today?
Well, time management probably played quite a large role in the outcome of this one. As ever, it's not just about speed, it's all about maintaining that speed consistently over a stint, over a race distance. So being able to keep up the lap times while still being smooth on the controls and gentle on the tyres, that's really where the race was won today.
Red Bull are our winners today after showcasing some incredible driving. There's been a huge push from them lately to stay competitive with the other teams, and they're certainly proving themselves.
There's a somewhat familiar sight from a couple of seasons ago. Danny Rick in the Red Bull uniform is standing on the top step of the podium. It's kind of funny how the game put him back there.
And now let's take a look at the driver's standings. It's a great result for Lewis Hamilton, who moves further ahead at the top of the table. Now, let's discuss, Ant. Who would you say is a contender for driver of the day?
I have to give it to Old Timer. They did a great job at getting the most out of their tyres without losing pace, something that's a very handy skill to have in modern-day Formula One.
It's time to see how things are shaping up in the Constructors' Championship. It was a tough race for our championship leaders who lose ground at the top of the table. Well, that was certainly an incredible weekend of racing. Be sure to join myself and Ant for more exciting Formula One action soon.
So we hold station in 9th place in the Drivers' Championship. Daniel Ricciardo, though, making moves now that he's in that Red Bull, coming for our spot. And George Russell still at P18 there, and everybody holds station in the Constructors' Championship. No moves really there. But I think I have to go back and watch. That might be our first driver of the day of our career, coming from the back of the grid for a P5
Good day
finish.
today. Let's have your take on it. How do you feel the weather affected the outcome today?
Oh, you know, it changed strategies, but the top drivers still perform the best.
You left a lot of paint on the walls today. Were you struggling for grip, or did you just misjudge some corners?
No comment. Claire. Claire!
Well, thanks anyway.
Alright, so here we are back in the garage. And we'll take a peek at how our rivalry is progressing. We've nearly beaten Lance Stroll, which I was kind of hoping it would be a little bit tighter, but the car really took a big jump in performance right as I made that choice. So we've been fighting Sergio Perez a lot more than Lance Stroll recently. And Checo's got crazy AI in this game. Like, he has got some massive pace for his car. We pick up a good chunk of resource points for this race, so we are going to hopefully be able to make something out of it. I don't understand quite why I lost so much rep with all the other teams, but who knows? Not sure how to calculate it sometimes.
Great work. That's exactly the kind of result I'm looking for. Keep it up.
But yeah, all in all, a track I wasn't super comfortable with coming into the race weekend. I spent quite a bit of extra time outside of the practice programs. I was running, you know, just the regular practice times as well to try and get a feel for the track. And I think I may have figured something out, maybe. Although the strategy definitely helped. But I mean, I had okay pace. I was able to make a fair number of on-track overtakes as well. But I think we just made a couple mistakes in our qualifying lap and just didn't quite have everything under the car. But we had good race pace, so I'll always stick with good race pace. But here we are in R&D. We've got 7 weeks left, and we've got 6 parts left to adapt. So we got 1,100 points, so we should be able to get, I believe, a minor upgrade somewhere, and and probably still afford a adaptation of another minor part. So we're going to go ahead and grab this front wing end plate, so front downforce, and we've got 440 points left. And yeah, we'll still be able to afford, it looks like, one of the minors. How much is it? Yeah, not quite enough for the major, but we can afford another of the minors. So we're essentially ahead of schedule on the adaptations. We've got 5 left to go, 6 weeks left in the season. We should have 2 upgrades arriving for us next week at Russia. But so as you can see on the part screen, that ICE is basically done. The MGUH that's on there, pretty much done. That'll be basically retired for the rest of the season, and same with the turbocharger. So we got good use out of those parts, but it'll be time to drop on some new pieces. At most, we may use those parts again for practice sessions when we want to save some of the other parts for races, but we are about to need a new practice gearbox as well. Saw that was in the yellow, but that has no penalty tied to it when we take a new one. But yeah, all in all, a better result than I was expecting at a track I wasn't super comfortable with coming into the race weekend. But, you know, a strategy gamble, good timing on when the rains came, and we managed to turn in a good result and get some good points. So we are in the final legs of our first season in Formula One here, and we're making Williams into a decent bit of a competitor here. So I'm feeling pretty good about how this is going. I do believe just with the pace differential between myself and my teammate, I didn't want to make it during the middle of the season, but I will be making a difficulty adjustment up between seasons 1 and 2. I really want to just finish out the season on the current difficulty so I can still see how the AI performs in relation to how I'm going. But I've definitely made some improvements over the course of the season in my own driving ability. So we'll see how it goes the rest of the season. Thank you for joining me. I will catch you guys next time. Peace.